together, eagerly. Finally! After nearly a month of radio silence, I had a brand new client to focus on and parcel out some of my sage direction for the lost soul who needed it. With a glance at my watch, I noticed that said client, Willem Entwistle, would be here any minute. Perfect, I told Gil, and turned toward my chair, which was set in the middle of a large, open space in what served as my office. I'd first decided to hang my shingle in an older building with a ton of character, but not a lot of commercial appeal, until I'd purchased the building and subsequently poured a ton of money into renovating it. Luckily, the renovations had turned out fabulously, and the entire building was fully rented with professional tenants who paid their rents on time and seemed to keep mostly to themselves. It's probably what I liked most about the building. In fact, it was superbly quiet, especially the third floor, where an accountant and an import-export merchant worked. Of course, that could be due to the fact that the import-export merchant was rarely in residence. In fact, he hadn't been to his office in the Hamptons, at least as near as I could tell, in over 3 months. Something that troubled me quite a bit, actually, but like Gilly, I was trying hard this morning not to dwell on topics that made me feel sad. As I sat down in the chair opposite the couch, I inhaled deeply, held it for a moment, then let it out very slowly. I did that 2 more times and felt ready to face any challenge. In hindsight, perhaps I should have taken a few more deep breaths. Like 50. At promptly 10 a.m., the main door to my office opened, and over the top of Gilly's desk, I saw someone enter who almost appeared to be walking in on his knees. He was so low to the ground. It took me a full minute to realize that the person wasn't on his knees. He was walking at full height. Gilly looked up from his computer and did a double-take. He then shoved the heel of his hand into his mouth and tried to stifle a startled giggle. He failed miserably. I stood up and rushed over to the desk. "Hello," I said, subconsciously bending at the waist toward the stranger, who was all of 4.5 feet tall, and trying to ignore Gilly. "May I help you?" The stranger squared his shoulders, but a sheen of perspiration glinted off his forehead. Taking my outstretched hand, he said, "Hello, I'm Willem. I have an appointment for 10 a.m. His palm was quite sweaty, and I felt my face flush, both at the embarrassment of having my assistant lose it in front of Willem, and for the fact that I'd once hired a crew of little people to dress up like cupids and dangle out of 2 pear trees at my sister's wedding, which, not coincidentally, had ended in disaster. The shame I'd felt these few years later at my insensitivity caught up with me as I shook Willem's sweaty palm. "Wonderful to meet you, Willem," I gushed, perhaps a bit too enthusiastically. "I'm Catherine Cooper, your life coach." By this time, Gilly had recovered himself enough to look quite contrite, but I'd still have words with him later. I was furious that he'd so obviously insulted my client. Willem shook my hand, and his gaze nervously darted around the room. I felt terrible that he'd come into my office for his first session and had been made to feel uncomfortable. "Can I offer you coffee, water, or another beverage?" I asked, waving my hand to indicate the seating area. "Do you have any herbal tea?" I nodded toward Gilly and narrowed my eyes to let him know that he was in trouble. "Gilly, would you please prepare a cup of herbal tea for Mr. Entwistle?" "Right away," Gilly said, trying to cover for his earlier insult. Jumping up from his chair and hurrying over to the counter where we kept our beverage selection, he pulled out the drawer for the tea and said, "We have chai, cinnamon, ginger, and—" Gilly paused while he rooted around in the tray looking for other flavors. "Any chamomile?" Willem asked. Gil frowned. "No, sorry, we're a little short." My eyes widened. So did Gilly's. He rushed to fill in the sudden awkward silence. I mean, we don't have any. Not that you're short. We're short. Out. We're out. Of chamomile." Gilly's face was flushed bright red and probably mirrored my own.